Hey, hey, hey. Time for an out-of-this-world story from rSpace. In the game of love, there are two rules. Play fair or prepare for a reckoning. Today on rSpace, nothing prepares you for the day your wife's work meetings turn out to be full of more than just PowerPoint slides. Wife's affair partner claimed she'll never leave me for you, so I showed him otherwise by exposing him at his workplace. I, 35 male, have been married to my wife, Jessie, 34 female, for 8 years. I always thought our relationship was built on trust, love, and mutual respect, but recent developments have left me questioning that. I'm questioning almost everything I thought I knew, both about myself and her. We've been talking about starting a family recently. Everything pointed to us being in a good place, but apparently I was dead wrong. My wife works as a software sales rep and frequently meets with clients as part of her job. I don't know the finer details at her work, but I understand that she sells accounting software to banks. She commutes a lot around the city to showcase the software to different banks, but she earns a healthy commission and is good at what she does. I was proud of her until a phone call showed me that she might be a little too good at her job. It was a call from a woman claiming to be the secretary of one of her clients. She was extremely nervous and made me assure her that my wife wasn't nearby before she spoke to me. My wife was out at work at the time, and I told her so. Alarm bells were going off in my head. A strange woman insisting that she couldn't talk to me with my wife present. But at the same time, I was crazy curious to hear what she had to say. There's a small part of me now that wishes that I hadn't indulged her so I could keep living my former life in ignorance, but the rational part of me is glad that she came forward. She refused to tell me her name, but she said that my wife had been visiting her boss and she was suspecting infidelity. I laughed and pointed out that she was a sales rep, and that was normal for her. She was just demonstrating the software to him and trying to make a sale. She told me that some clients were difficult and needed more than a few meetings to be fully convinced. The secretary told me that she knew that, and she said she hadn't thought much of it at first. She only became suspicious when she realized that my wife would walk into his office with her ring on, but wouldn't be wearing it when she left. I didn't have a response for that. It was highly suspicious behavior. I turned it over multiple ways in my mind, but nothing made sense. I knew some female sales reps used their attractiveness to close the deal, and I imagined that she might remove her ring to make herself seem available to a client. That didn't work though, because she wouldn't wear her ring into his office. She would remove it earlier, probably before she even entered the building. My mystery caller noticed my silence and asked if I was okay. I just told her to go on. I was hoping she would drop some additional pieces of information that would make everything make sense in my head. There was no such luck. She went on to tell me that her boss had meetings scheduled with her 3 to 4 times a week. Sometimes they would go out for lunch. I was conflicted. This all sounded like it could be part of winning over a particularly indecisive and potentially massive client, but the ring still weighed on my mind. I could only think of one reason why she would take it off while she was alone with him in his office, and it made me sick. I thanked her for coming forward with the information and asked if she could tell me who her boss was. She was reluctant at first, and she told me he could make things very difficult for her if he found out what she had told me. I promised not to tell anyone where I heard this from. I assured her that I appreciated her actions and that I would protect her. She sounded relieved and told me her boss's name. I wanted to confront my wife and find out if this was true, but all I had to go on was the word of a woman I'd never met. I decided I would bring it up anyway, but I would watch her reaction carefully. When she got home that day, she was her usual cheerful self. She kissed me on the cheek, asked me about my day, and told me about hers. I tried to stay calm through it all. I couldn't keep the image of her and this other guy out of her mind. When she started telling me about some client that was finally coming around to the software, I let it slip. The same way you got Greg to come around? She'd been fishing something out of her purse when I said that, and she froze still. I waited for her to say something. I could nearly see the gears turning in her head. She must have been trying to figure out if she'd ever mentioned him to me. I put her out of her misery. I told her that I knew about Greg. I said I had the word of a private investigator who had spoken to his coworkers. To her credit, she folded immediately. Her face crumpled and she sank into a chair. She hid her hands in her face and said she'd never meant for it to happen. It was a bad mistake. A mistake. That's what she called the repeated act that tanked 8 years of marriage. A mistake. I took a deep breath and asked her how long it had been going on. She hesitated before telling me it had been a few months. I asked her the question that had been burning a hole in my chest since the secretary's phone call. Why did you take your ring off when you went into his office? She looked like she'd seen a ghost. She was probably wondering how I knew that. She hesitated for an extremely long while before she finally admitted, "He didn't like to, with the ring on." She couldn't meet my gaze. She couldn't bring herself to finish her sentence, but it was obvious what the omitted word was. I felt sick. She had already admitted to it earlier, but something about hearing that made it feel so much more real. I saw the future we'd been planning together falling apart in front of me. She begged me for forgiveness. She kept repeating that she'd do anything to fix this. She'd stop seeing him. She'd quit her job, anything. She kept repeating that as if it was so easy to fix what she destroyed. I haven't walked out yet. I'm still in our apartment, with her sleeping soundly beside me, wondering what exactly I'm going to do. 8 years is a lot to throw away, but it's been about 2 days, and my hurt and my anger haven't faded even a little. My mind is settling towards ending the relationship, as much as that will hurt. Any advice from you guys? It's not just about the physical act. It's about the emotional betrayal, the lies, and the fact that she kept it from you. If she's willing to put in the work to rebuild what once was with you, it's going to take more than just quitting her job or saying she's sorry. Update. I'm back with an update to my story. In case you don't remember, I'm the guy whose wife was pitching more than her company's software in her client meetings. I ended my last post by saying I wasn't sure whether to try and make my relationship work or call it off. The decision was a lot easier to make after I went ahead to confront her affair partner. I found Greg's info on LinkedIn and managed to get his contact information. I sent him a message where I made up some nonsense about an opportunity, and I managed to schedule a meeting with him. As I stood outside his office door, I noticed the secretary at her desk. She clearly recognized me because she was trying her hardest not to look at me. I knew she was nervous about being found out, so I did my best not to look at her either. When he finally let me in, I noticed they had gaudy taste. His office was decked out in faux leather chairs, every diploma he'd ever received, a bunch of weird artsy trinkets, and an oversized desk. I couldn't look at that desk without imagining what he might have done with Jesse there. He stood up and offered me a hand when I walked in. I didn't take it and just said, "I'm Jesse's husband." The grin slid off his face for a second and he sat back down. I didn't take a seat. I told him that I knew all about their meetings and lunches. I had pictures that a PI had taken. I asked him if he had anything to say for himself. He did have something to say. With a smirk on his face, he said that Jessie was a grown woman who made her choice. He said they'd had long talks about our relationship, and he insisted that she was happier with him than she was with me. "She'll never leave me for you, you know." He went on about how she said she felt trapped in our marriage and wasn't sure she wanted kids yet, but didn't know how to tell me. She was bored with me and looking for an escape. That devastated me, and it was at the moment I decided my relationship was done for good. The betrayal was too deep to repair. I didn't say anything to Greg. I just turned and left his office. But the whole time I was coming up with ways to get back at them both. I was too hurt to let them go like that. When I got home that day, I told my wife that I was ready to forgive her on one condition. She would send an email to Greg's workplace detailing the nature of their relationship. She was appalled and refused outright. I didn't argue with her. I just told her that I would call a lawyer to draw up divorce papers in the morning. I could see that she was torn. She really didn't want to divorce, but she didn't want to humiliate herself and her affair partner at the same time. She spent the next 30 minutes pleading for an alternative, but I reminded her that she had said she would do anything. She tried every tactic she could think of to get out of it, but I stood firm. I fed her some nonsense about how it was the only way for me to be sure of her love so I could begin to forgive her. Eventually, she reluctantly and tearfully agreed. That night I sat by and watched as she drafted an email to his workplace revealing her affair. I really made sure she didn't leave anything out. The lunches, the trysts in his office on company time, how long it had been going on. She showed it to me a few times and I pointed out some additions I wanted her to make. Once I was fully satisfied with the email, she sent it out. She wasn't happy about exposing her actions because she knew it could mean the end of her career as well. I reassured her that it was the only way for us to move forward as a couple. She wasn't happy about it, but she seemed to accept it. I knew she was just glad that she was getting an easy way out of what she'd done. Throughout the next day, she seemed nervous. She seemed distracted and kept glancing at her phone. It was pretty obvious that she was waiting for a call from Greg, expecting him to blow up at her for ruining his career. That call wouldn't come until the next day. Greg exploded on the end of the phone, hurling insults at her. My wife just cried and explained that she was trying to fix her relationship and that this was the only way. I can't explain how happy that call made me. My wife's tears didn't touch me even a little bit. I was done caring for her. I was actually pleased to see her actually experiencing some consequences for what she'd done. What really made me happy was seeing Greg so distressed. It was payback for what he'd said, that she'd never leave him for me. I wanted to grab the phone out of my wife's hand and gloat, but I wasn't done yet. They both still had more to come. He told her that he was suspended while they carried out an investigation and that he was going to make sure she lost her job for it as well. She broke down sobbing when he said that. She started begging him not to do it, but he was furious. I just stood over her, watching her cry. When he ended the call, she ran over to cry into my chest about losing her job. I told her that we had both anticipated that that would happen, and now we could start to move on together. Greg made good on his promise. He reported her to her employers, just like she had done. Unlike Greg, her investigation was a lot shorter and quicker, and she lost her job almost immediately. That destroyed her, but once again, I comforted her, telling her that our relationship was stronger now, and it was worth it. She agreed with me. Honestly, I wasn't sure whether she actually believed that, or if she was just glad to be given an easy out to her cheating. I stuck with Jessie for a little while after she lost her job. She'd been leaning on me more than ever. I let her think that we were working towards a reconciliation, telling her that we would rebuild together. The truth is, I was just savoring watching her fill with hope and pull herself back together before I tore it all down. Meanwhile, I was keeping tabs on Greg. He lost his job about a month after the email. He didn't call Jessie this time. I found out through his LinkedIn. He had changed his status to freelance consulting, a very fancy way of saying he was unemployed. It looked like his reputation was spreading because he was losing connections on LinkedIn daily. I imagine he was having a very hard time finding a new job like this. The moment I heard about his termination, I sprang into action. Just when Jessie seemed to be getting over the loss of her job, I told her I wanted a divorce. She was angry at first, screaming at me that she had done what I asked. She called me all sorts of names and threw a proper tantrum. She said she'd sacrificed her career for me. I replied that she hadn't sacrificed anything for me, she'd thrown it all away herself. She obviously didn't respect her career all that much if she was putting out for clients on company time. I honestly expected her to stay angry with me. I mean, I'd tricked her into losing her job, and I was still divorcing her. But the anger faded quickly. In no time, she went from mad to pleading. She said she wouldn't have anything left if I went through with this. I said that everything she lost was a direct consequence of her own actions. This was all her fault, not mine. She begged me to reconsider, swearing that she would do anything to save us. I told her that there was nothing she could do. As far as I was concerned, there was no us to save anymore. There hadn't been an us to save ever since I found out about what she'd done. That was when I revealed to her that I had never forgiven her. I just wanted to hurt her as deeply as she had hurt me. She was still pleading as I handed over the divorce papers. Before I left, I repeated what Greg had told me, that she would never leave him for me. I mentioned everything that she had confided in him, that she felt trapped in her marriage, that she wasn't ready for children. The betrayal was too deep to be forgiven so easily. She didn't have a comeback to any of that. She just kept sobbing and pleading. I got reasonably lucky in the divorce. She earned pretty well before she lost her job, and I managed to get away without paying alimony. I was a little bitter that she got the apartment at first, but it was a bit of a blessing anyway. It was going to be a pain to pay the rent for the place in one paycheck. Good luck to her affording rent while she was unemployed. Speaking of which, she was having a lot of trouble finding a new job. Working in sales requires a lot of trust between clients and salespersons. And it turns out people have a hard time trusting someone who is known for sleeping with a client. It doesn't end with the divorce though. Only a couple of days after I found out he had lost his job, Greg started texting me. At first, they were just angry messages accusing me of ruining his life, but they got worse with time. Eventually, he started sending me full-on threats. It was a little worrying at first, but I was pretty sure that he wouldn't actually show up at my home and try to hurt me. He was just some loser trying to find a way to make himself feel big again after losing everything. I wasn't going to take any chances though, so I replied and told him that I'd sent his messages to my lawyer and that we were working on a restraining order. I also said I sent a copy of his messages to local law enforcement in case anything happened to me. He changed his song pretty quickly after that, sending me another string of messages apologizing and telling me to take it easy. He claimed that he was just venting. I told him I didn't appreciate being used to vent and that I and my lawyer were still taking the threats very seriously. I stopped hearing from him shortly after that. In the end, I walked out of the situation happily with the outcome. Jessie and Greg both got what they deserved, and I refused to feel any guilt about it. Jessie had betrayed our marriage, and Greg had mocked me, thinking he was invincible. They both learned their lesson, and I was satisfied walking away with whatever win I could get out of this messed up situation. One day, I'll get over all of this, so I know I made the right decision. I can't blame you for wanting them both to face some consequences. Your wife's refusal to take responsibility for her actions and then Greg's smug attitude. I mean, clearly they didn't respect you. Getting them both back in the way you did, particularly with Jessie's job loss and Greg's reputation tarnished, was a way of making sure they didn't get off scot-free. I'm here for it, OP. Thank you for joining us today on rSpace. Be sure to like and subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss out on our next video. See you next time.